They didn't even try to whisper it. "She's the failure," my uncle muttered as I walked past the hors d'oeuvres table. My cousin chuckled like it was an inside joke. The entire engagement party buzzed with champagne, praise, and polite applause for everyone but me. I wasn't dressed in designer, didn't arrive in a luxury car. I was just there, invisible, until I wasn't. When my brother's fiancé turned to me and asked, "Wait, you're the founder of Stonebeam Collective?" The room didn't go silent. It froze. Every face that had looked through me now looked at me, and in that moment, they didn't see the black sheep. They saw the architect of something they never believed I could build. But by then, I didn't need them to. "Hi, I'm Riley. I've been called a disappointment more times than I can count. But this story isn't about proving them wrong. It's about building something real when no one thinks you can." If you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated, this one's for you. Stay with me. I never thought I'd be invisible at my own brother's engagement party. But then again, I should have known better. The invitation arrived in a cream-colored envelope with my mother's tight cursive scrawled across the front. No return address, no "Dear Eliza," not even a scribbled note inside. Just gold-embossed lettering and RSVP instructions. That was my first clue. I wasn't being invited. I was being tolerated. Like one of those pine-scented candles people keep out of guilt. Still, I went. Out of obligation. Or stubbornness. Or maybe some misguided hope that this time, someone might see me for more than the one who walked away. I wore a simple navy dress, brought a small gift wrapped in brown paper, and drove 4 hours from Winslow in a borrowed pickup because my own rust bucket was still waiting on a fuel pump. The Alder Ridge Lodge looked like something out of a Sundance film. Log beams, stone fireplaces, string lights swaying in the mountain breeze. The valet barely looked up when I gave my name. "You at the caterers?" he asked. I smiled, tight, rehearsed. "Nope, just family." Somewhere inside, something splintered. Inside the lodge, soft cello music curled around the scent of wood polish and imported wine. Beige linens, antler chandeliers, polished boots on polished hardwood. Everyone looked like they belonged on the cover of Southwest Living. And there I was, Eliza Hartman, the used-to-be promising one. Or, as my mother once muttered at brunch, our wandering architect with her little build-a-house hobby. Mason stood near the head table laughing with his fiancée Laurel, the radiant future of the Hartman family. She was all high cheekbones and grace, the kind of woman who knew which fork to use and how to walk in heels on gravel. I tried to catch Mason's eye, but he was mid-toast, charming as ever. To roots, timber, and building legacies that don't rot with time. I blinked. Was that irony or just cosmic comedy? Because 5 years ago, I left Hartman Timberworks after discovering they were underbidding contracts to replace affordable housing with luxury cabins. When I raised concerns, my father told me I was misunderstanding scale. When I didn't back down, I was moved to a desk in the copy room. Then, not long after, no desk at all. So I left. And I built something else. Quietly, without a nameplate. Something I didn't think anyone in this room would ever care to know about. Until now. Not 5 minutes after I sat at the back, near the hallway to the restrooms, my wine glass teetering on an unsteady birch centerpiece, Laurel approached. Her heels tapped like punctuation marks across the hardwood. She leaned close, all smile and curiosity. "Hi," she said softly. "I just have to ask, you're Eliza Hartman, right?" I blinked. "Yes?" "As in, the Civic Hearth Eliza Hartman?" My grip on the glass tightened. "I saw your talk, TEDx Albuquerque, the one about sustainable rebuilds in fire zones?" Her voice had risen, just enough to catch the attention of a few nearby guests. My cousin volunteers with you, in Santa Fe. Mason paused mid-conversation across the room. So did the music, like the air had just shifted. Laurel took a small step back, eyes wide. Wait, you're the founder of Civic Hearth? And just like that, silence fell. I heard the faint clink of my mother's fork falling. An uncle cleared his throat. Mason just stared, as if I'd turned into someone he couldn't place, someone real. I didn't stand. I didn't raise my voice. I just smiled, not smug, just calm. Yes, I said. That's me. Laurel's eyes sparkled. That's incredible. I always thought Hartman Timberworks was the only family name out there making an impact. Guess they left a few footnotes out of the family tree, huh? She meant it kindly. I took it as gospel, because in that moment, I didn't need validation, or applause, or forgiveness. I had something else. Recognition. Quiet. Uninvited. Undeniable. And sometimes, that's all it takes to shake the family tree until the rotten branches fall. Dinner was simple. Just the three of us seated at a quiet corner table in Aspen Hollow Cafe, nestled between a used bookstore and a candle shop in downtown Durango. Strings of amber lights crisscrossed above our heads, casting soft shadows on the weathered wood walls. It was Aubrey's idea. She said it would be nice to have a calm moment before the wedding chaos kicked in. I wasn't sure if she really meant it, or if she was just trying to smooth over the awkwardness after unintentionally revealing my identity in front of everyone. Grant, as usual, was all grins. He leaned back with the ease of a man who hadn't been shaken by anything in years, wine glass dangling lazily from 2 fingers. So, he said, his voice brimming with pride, I got the official call this morning. They're promoting me, Regional Director for the Mountain West Development. Aubrey clapped. That's amazing, babe. You've worked so hard for this. He tried to downplay it with a shrug, but the puff of his chest gave him away. I offered a small smile. This was the same Grant who once painted the bathroom mirror with toothpaste. Now he was managing 7-figure budgets and making speeches at fundraisers, and marrying Aubrey Flynn, who was thoughtful, warm, and the kind of person who remembered your dog's birthday. They worked well together, I had to admit. Halfway through the meal, Aubrey reached into her purse. I brought something for you, she said to Grant, handing him a tiny box wrapped in a napkin. He opened it and tilted his head. Inside was a small wooden keychain, carved into the shape of a stone brick, with a burned-in emblem on one side. What's this? He asked, holding it up. It's from Stonebeam Collective, she replied, her voice softening. They rebuilt my grandma's home after that flood in Silver Pines. We would have had to move into a trailer if it weren't for them. Grant blinked. Stonebeam what? Stonebeam Collective, she repeated with a smile. It's a nonprofit that helps restore homes after disasters. They built back the whole block. I sent them a thank you video. The founder's initials were RH, I think. My fingers froze on the stem of my glass. Grant nodded without much interest. Huh, cool. He slipped the keychain into his blazer pocket like it was a receipt. Then he added offhandedly, my sister used to study architecture or something. She dropped out. Now she, builds sheds or community shelters, I think? Aubrey turned to me, surprised. Really? I didn't look up. Something like that. They moved on. Talk shifted to wedding venues. She wanted something in the canyon. He leaned more vineyard chic. Then her uncle's tendency to cry during speeches, and how they hoped to honeymoon in Washington state. I let the wine blur the edges of the conversation. Grant didn't recognize the logo on the keychain, didn't connect the group that helped his fiance's family with the sister he thought had simply drifted. And I didn't correct him. Later that night, I lay awake in my apartment, the sound of distant wind brushing the trees outside. I got up and pulled my old hard drive from the shelf, scratched, dented, full of dusty files I hadn't opened in years. I plugged it in, searching for one folder in particular. Testimonials, 2017. There it was. A grainy video played on my screen. A young woman, maybe 20, standing beside her grandmother in front of a small white house with a new roof and bright green shutters. Behind them, the hills of silver pines still bore scars of mudslides. They smiled despite it all. "Thank you, Stonebeam," Aubrey's voice said. "Thank you for giving my grandma a home again, for giving us something to believe in." I remembered everything. The blueprint drawn on my kitchen table, the volunteer crew of retired carpenters and local teens, the way the whole place smelled like wet pine and rusted tools. That build had nearly drained our budget, but we did it. And now? Now the man who tossed the keychain aside like a freebie at a trade show was marrying the woman we helped, and neither of them knew it. I could have said something. Could have told Grant that the initials on the keychain were mine. That Stonebeam Collective wasn't a charity I admired. It was the blood and skin and bone of everything I'd rebuilt after walking away from our family's glossy empire. But I didn't. Not because I wanted to punish him, not because I needed validation, but because sometimes the truth lands deeper when it's uncovered, not handed out. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't ready to see it. I shut down the laptop, letting the screen fade into darkness. Outside, a light snow had started to fall, and somewhere out there, I imagined the little white house in silver pines, still standing, still warm, just like the work I'd built, even if no one in my family ever cared to look. I kept it hidden for 6 years, pressed flat between the pages of an old bread-baking cookbook I never opened, folded so tightly it held its shape like something sacred. The handwriting, shaky but unmistakable, belonged to my grandmother. The envelope had gone soft and thin with time. She gave it to me 2 days before she passed, pressing it into my palm with those pale, knowing fingers. "This is for you, honey," she whispered. "Only when you're ready." I wasn't. Not then. Maybe not even now. Grandma Eliza was the only person in our family who ever listened without trying to steer. When I was 10, she let me draw imaginary houses on her screened porch in sidewalk chalk and told me I had engineer's hands. When I was 17, she left $20 in my coat pocket with a note. Gas money. Go see the world. When I dropped out of the architecture program, she didn't blink, just held me and said, "Some structures aren't meant to be finished." She never saw Stonebeam Collective, but she was the voice behind every foundation we laid. Maybe that's why I couldn't read the letter. I was afraid it would say she was disappointed. That morning, the sun cut through my small cabin apartment in Bozeman, streaking across sketches and folded maps. A half-empty thermos of coffee sat next to a stack of printed blueprints. I stared at the envelope resting on my desk, still sealed, still waiting. At Stonebeam, we were in the middle of restoring a trailer duplex outside Livingston after a propane tank accident blew out half the kitchen. I moved between crews, older carpenters who'd once built the local elementary school, and college kids trying to trade screen time for sore hands. Nobody there knew my full name. They just called me RH. That anonymity wasn't a coincidence. It was a boundary, a shield between the world I built and the one that forgot me. We didn't do PR. We didn't host gala dinners or hand out tote bags. We built. We patched. We showed up when nobody else did. Then, one Tuesday, an email landed in our general inbox. Simple subject line: request for rural home restoration. The sender: GFLYNN. I froze. Flynn, from Montana. I opened it slowly. It described an old farmhouse on the edge of Flathead County, passed down from their grandmother. After last winter's thaw, pipes had burst, walls buckled. They didn't expect much, just asked if we took on non-disaster cases. Said the place mattered to their family. Then came the final line: Even if we don't qualify, I wanted to say thank you. Your work gave my cousin Aubrey and her family shelter when they had nowhere else to go. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the message. The air in the room thinned. That night, Aubrey texted me. Coffee? Just us. I have something on my mind. We met at a small cafe tucked into the side of a feed store. She wore an oatmeal sweater and snow-dusted boots. She smiled the same as always. Kind, collected, not the type to force anything. I hope this doesn't sound weird, she said, wrapping her hands around a ceramic mug. But, do you know someone who works at Stonebeam? My throat tightened. Why do you ask? I got a reply from one of your team members about my cousin's house, she said. And the wording, I don't know. It just sounded like something you'd write. I let out a small laugh, barely audible. That's a pretty specific feeling. Maybe, she said, but it's a strong one. She didn't press, just sipped her coffee, eyes soft. I changed the subject. Wedding dates, RSVP drama, some cousin who kept trying to bring a +3. She let it go. When I got home, I didn't even take off my jacket. I walked straight to the bookshelf and pulled out the cookbook. My fingers hesitated on the spine. I opened the envelope. The ink was faded. The paper curled at the edges. But her handwriting still whispered across the page. You don't need to prove anything. The strongest ones never do. They just live in a way people can't forget. My fingers trembled. I read it again and again. It wasn't disappointment waiting in that letter. It was release. I hadn't failed. I had simply chosen another path. One without applause. One with meaning. And somehow, even in silence, someone had heard. Even in the shadows, someone had remembered. I hadn't planned on going. Speaking in public was never part of the blueprint, not when staying invisible was my safest architecture. But the invitation to speak at a symposium in Flagstaff on post-disaster rebuilding stuck with me. The email came from a retired architect who used to work with FEMA. Years ago, he'd written a handwritten thank you to Stonebeam Collective, praising our work as designing for dignity. He ended it. To RH, wherever you are, your work did more than fix buildings. It fixed people. It took me a week to say yes. The event wasn't flashy. No banners, no lights. Just a weathered auditorium on the Northern Arizona University campus, lined with metal chairs and soft murmurs from city planners, builders, and people who'd lost everything and rebuilt anyway. When I stepped to the podium, I wore no name tag, just jeans, a blazer, and the trust in a quiet slideshow. Photos of battered homes turned back into sanctuaries, diagrams of low-cost retrofits, and the smiles of volunteers whose names never made the headlines. Halfway through the Q&A, an elderly woman in a plaid coat stood up in the third row. Her hair was silver, pulled back in a loose twist, and her hands trembled on the microphone. I lost my home in the East Rim fire last year, she said. Thought I'd never see that old family picture again. My boys in the snow, my husband holding the camera. But your people found it behind the wall insulation. She paused, breath catching. Stonebeam didn't just build me a new roof. You gave me back a piece of who I was. I swallowed hard. The applause felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. I nodded and said only, "Thank you." No one asked my name, and I didn't offer it. Back in Sedona, another kind of story was rising. My father, Leon Holloway, was preparing to unveil his biggest real estate push yet, the Holloway Vista Initiative. All the marketing buzzwords were there. Sustainable urbanism, revitalization, clean slate communities. But I knew the code. It meant displacing lower-income residents and paving over old neighborhoods with glass and granite. Grant had been tapped to lead the branding campaign. He brought his charm, a digital pitch deck, and a few too many shortcuts. One night over dinner, I overheard him tell our father, One of the research briefs even quotes some housing nonprofit, Stonebeam or something, said the founder's initials were RH. Dad didn't look up from his plate. RH question mark. That's the outfit that keeps slowing permit approvals. Do-gooders with no sense of market flow. Just ignore them. I felt the heat rise in my chest. They didn't know. They didn't realize the area Holloway Vista was targeting overlapped with the very zone where Stonebeam had just completed its environmental assessment. We'd been preparing to support residents with rebuild plans, and now, if the initiative launched, everything we'd done would be bulldozed, permits fast-tracked before any community meeting could take place. It wasn't accidental. The city had been quietly lobbied. I was trapped between two selves again. Riley Harmon, the daughter written out of the narrative, and RH, the founder quietly holding up a wall between corporate greed and the vulnerable. Then came a twist I didn't expect. Grant and I were both invited to speak at the Western Urban Development Forum in San Diego. His topic? Shaping Tomorrow's Cities, Vision Meets Value. Mine? Invisible Foundations, Community-First Design in Crisis Recovery. Two versions of the future on the same stage. I didn't tell anyone I accepted. But someone else had been piecing things together. That evening, just as I was labeling architectural samples in my workshop, there was a knock on my door. Aubrey stood outside. She didn't smile this time. She just held out a printed page, a testimonial from one of Stonebeam's earliest builds. I recognized it instantly. The house we salvaged after a monsoon washout near Tucson. The name at the bottom, faint but there, read, RH, Project Lead. She handed it to me without a word, then said, I only have one question. I didn't move. You're RH, aren't you? I didn't answer, but I didn't look away either. Riley didn't answer right away. She opened the door just a little wider and stepped aside. Come in, she said, her voice low but steady. Aubrey walked in, her gaze taking in the compact apartment tucked in the hills above Asheville. It was quiet, grounded. The hardwood floors creaked under their steps, and the windows still held the scent of pine from the breeze outside. On a narrow shelf sat three small architectural models, one with a broken gable, another pinned with colored tags. A whiteboard leaned against the wall, smeared slightly but legible. 3 words were written in blue: stone, shelter, people. Riley handed her a glass of water and sat across from her, hands folded. She didn't offer explanations. Instead, she asked about Aubrey's work, her upcoming move to Charleston, her grandfather's recent recovery. Anything to turn the light away from what hovered between them. But Aubrey didn't let it drift. My grandfather, she began softly, he always said, some folks build for profit, others build because they remember what it's like to sleep cold. Riley's mouth curved into the gentlest smile. He sounds like someone who knew the long way around. He does. And so do you. Aubrey's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Her eyes glanced around again, to the models, the notes, the framed photo of a rebuilt home in the Smokies. Then she looked back at Riley. I used to wonder who created Stonebeam Collective. I wanted to thank them. I never imagined it would be someone I saw every Sunday for brunch, someone who never once mentioned her own name. The pause that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things unsaid, the kind that grow roots in silence. Riley set her glass down. She didn't look away. Stonebeam wasn't a legacy project, she said. It was survival. After being told I wasn't valuable, after being cut out like I didn't matter, I needed to build something that couldn't be taken from me. Her voice didn't crack, but what lived beneath it, grit, grief, grace, spoke louder than words. Aubrey nodded slowly, like she was cradling that truth, holding it without the need to fix it. Outside, in the hallway where the air smelled faintly of damp earth, Grant Holloway stood still. He'd come by late, sent by their father to drop off a folder of final renderings for the Holloway Vista project. But when he heard voices from behind the door, Aubrey's, then Riley's, he froze. He didn't knock. He didn't open the door. He just listened. When he heard his sister say, "Something that couldn't be taken from me," something moved in his chest. Something that didn't have a name yet, but felt like reckoning. That night, back at his own condo near the French Broad River, Grant sat at his laptop. He opened the internal server where he stored press materials for the Holloway campaign. Then he typed Stonebeam Collective into the archive search. One folder, 2 articles, and a buried .pdf from 5 years back. City permit notes for a rural rebuild project near Brevard. Attached to the file was a scanned newspaper clipping. Grainy, faded. But there, centered in the image, was a woman in jeans and a hard hat, sleeves rolled up, crouching beside a crate of reclaimed timber, pencil behind her ear. Riley. No byline, no initials. Just work. Just purpose. Past midnight, Grant picked up his phone. He texted Aubrey, "How long have you known?" A pause. Then her reply came through. "You don't have to know for long. You just have to know where to look." The banquet hall of Rancho Azul shimmered with muted desert tones and soft candlelight. Clay lanterns flickered against adobe walls, casting warm shadows over hand-painted tiles and driftwood beams. Everything about the evening whispered elegance with a southwestern edge. This was Grant and Aubrey's engagement party, and it was seamless. Riley paused at the edge of the grand courtyard, rereading the last email from her mother for the 3rd time. "Wear something cheerful this time. It's a celebration, darling, not one of your TED Talks." Not cruel, exactly, but patronizing in that sweet Southern way, polished condescension disguised as care. She tugged at the sleeve of her deep teal wrap dress. Simple lines, earthy fabric, not flashy, not loud, just her. Inside, Aubrey spotted her from across the mosaic-tiled floor and beamed, crossing quickly in her strappy heels to pull her into a hug. "You came," she whispered, with a squeeze that felt like gratitude, not obligation. Riley returned the gesture, offering a gentle smile. She made her way to the table she'd been assigned, near the kitchen corridor, where the scent of roasted poblano and coriander drifted in each time the staff opened the swinging door. The center of the celebration was well lit, buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses. She wasn't seated there. Between bites of cumin-dusted canapes, a woman in a string of turquoise beads leaned toward her. "So I heard you rebuild stuff? Is that right? Like old barns or something?" Riley answered evenly. "I work in post-disaster housing. We focus on rebuilding homes for displaced families." Before the woman could formulate a reply, her mother, seated just far enough to seem unbothered, chimed in with a smile. Riley's always been such a giver, even as a child, bandaging stray dogs, handing out soup in the rain, always the helper. Riley said nothing. Across the room, Aubrey watched. Her hand slipped into her clutch, brushing the edge of a folded paper. The photo and transcript she'd carried like a secret. The image of Riley in construction boots and a windbreaker, a blue scarf twisted in her hair, standing beside a shell of a home she helped raise from rubble. The woman who built, not just belonged. Later, Grant's father took the stage near the adobe fireplace. He raised his glass and smiled toward the crowd. "The Holloways don't just develop properties," he said. "We create cornerstones, structures that outlast us, that let our children and theirs stand taller." Polite applause followed. Riley took a slow sip of her sangria, her expression quiet, unreadable. Aubrey looked at her again, really looked, and saw something beneath the stillness. Not resentment, not envy. Something more raw, more real. Then Aubrey stood. She cleared her throat. "If I could, just a moment," she said, stepping forward. The microphone gave a brief crackle before settling into silence. She placed her clutch beside the dessert trays, unfolded the paper, and raised her eyes to the guests. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she said, steady, bright. "But more than that, I want to thank the person who showed me what it means to build with heart." She held up the photo. The screen behind her, dormant until now, flickered on, projecting a black and white video of a silver-haired woman in front of a newly finished adobe cottage. "Stonebeam Collective didn't just rebuild my house," the woman said, her voice trembling with feeling. "They brought my husband's memory back to life. They rebuilt where others had given up." The room stirred. Then came the final image. Built by Stonebeam Collective, founded by R.H. Kiro, Riley Harmon. Chairs shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even Grant's father blinked twice, caught between confusion and recognition. Riley didn't rise. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. She simply sat still, shoulders square, gaze steady, hands resting in her lap. For once, they looked at her and saw. The Red Earth Pavilion had fallen silent. So silent, even the desert wind outside seemed to pause. The last frame of the video glowed faintly on the sandstone wall. Built by Stonebeam Collective, founded by R.H. Riley Harmon. No one moved. No one spoke. The soft flicker of candlelight on copper sconces felt harsher now, like it had turned cold the moment the truth stepped into view. Riley sat still. Her hands rested gently in her lap. Her spine stayed straight. Nothing in her face moved, but behind her eyes, years of being overlooked, minimized, and misjudged quietly aligned like bricks finally settling into place. Aubrey stepped back from the mic. "I just want to say thank you," she said, voice trembling just slightly. "Stonebeam didn't just rebuild my grandmother's home. They restored her faith. They made her feel worthy again. I used to wonder who had the heart to do that. Turns out, she was in the room the whole time." She looked at Riley, and she never once asked for credit. A murmur passed through the guests like a breeze through dry leaves. One woman placed her drink down with exaggerated care. Another whispered something no one caught. Riley's mother clutched the arms of her chair. Her knuckles whitened as she blinked rapidly, face frozen somewhere between disbelief and fear. Then Riley's father rose. His voice sliced through the quiet. "So that's where the money went," he said flatly, eyes narrowing. "You've been off playing savior with broken houses and misfits while this family, your family, moves forward. What exactly were you trying to prove?" Riley turned toward him. Her voice was soft, but it filled the room. "That some things are worth saving, even if they don't profit." No one breathed. Grant stood next. The air in the room snapped tighter. Everyone expected him to patch things up, to speak for the Holloways like his father always had. But instead, he stepped beside Riley. "She's the only one in this family who's never chased applause," he said, "and the only one who's actually changed lives." The words landed like a stone in still water. Voices rustled again, low, uncertain. A fork clattered to the floor. Someone cleared their throat and said nothing. Their father's jaw flexed. Then, without another word, he turned and strode toward the glass doors. The wind caught the edge of his coat as he vanished into the desert night. Riley's mother remained seated. She didn't protest, didn't follow. Her eyes stayed locked on Riley, not with judgment this time, but with a quiet, unfamiliar searching, as if seeing her, really seeing her, for the very first time. The silence broke when a tall man in a navy blazer approached. He wasn't flashy, just direct. He extended a hand. "Stonebeam's been on my radar for a while. Didn't expect to find its founder here tonight." Riley rose slowly. She shook his hand, firm and steady. "Thank you," she said. "But we don't build for attention. We build so people remember who they are. The man nodded. His smile was the kind that only comes when something clicks, when a puzzle you never knew you had suddenly makes sense. Riley turned and walked toward the open doors. She didn't hurry. She didn't wave. And she didn't look back. But every eye followed her. And for the first time in years, not a single one held pity or dismissal. Only respect. 2 days had slipped by since the night at Red Earth Pavilion, but the stillness that followed clung to Riley like fog after a mountain storm. The little office of Stonebeam Collective hadn't changed. Its cedar walls still creaked in the afternoon heat, and the coffee machine in the corner still made a sound like a tired sigh, but something in the air had shifted. Riley sat alone at her work table, surrounded by sketches, notes, and old material samples. Her inbox was overflowing. Developers, media, even past critics, all suddenly interested. But it wasn't the glossy proposals or congratulatory emails that caught her eye. It was a plain, slightly yellowed envelope tucked beneath a blueprint tube. No name, no stamp, no seal. She opened it with deliberate care. Inside was an old will, creased, well-worn, clearly handled more than once. Clipped to it was a short, folded note written in thick, assertive cursive. Even before her eyes confirmed it, her heart recognized the hand that had written it, her father's. Riley, if you're holding this, it means I didn't make it to the end with the truth. I used to think that straying from the path I built for you meant you had failed me, but now I understand. You were just brave enough to walk a better one. I dreamed you'd take over the company, not because you followed orders, but because you saw what I was too afraid to see. I wrote this. I didn't send it, not because I didn't mean it, but because I feared it might come too late. Dad. She didn't move to the chair. Instead, she sat down on the reclaimed wood floor, legs folded, letter in hand. The silence in the room wasn't empty, it was full. Full of weight, of years carried quietly. And yet now, they felt lighter somehow. She read it again, then once more. No tears, no words, just a breath. A deep, full breath, as if her lungs were relearning how to take in forgiveness. The door creaked open. She hadn't heard footsteps, but when she looked up, there he was. Grant. He didn't knock, didn't announce himself. He simply walked to the desk and placed a small USB drive next to a stack of wood samples. It's all here, he said, voice low. Every file from the Holloway Heritage redevelopment, the real audits, the misfiled permits, the shortcuts they hoped no one would question. I quit this morning. His eyes met hers. I'm done building things that look good on the outside but collapse inside. If there's a place for me, I want to build something real. With you. Riley looked at him. Not through him, not around him, but at him. For the first time in years, she didn't have to brace herself. She didn't stand, didn't speak. Just nodded once, and that was enough. Grant stepped back, leaving the drive on the table. He didn't linger. The door clicked gently behind him. Riley remained there for a moment longer. Then she stood, collected the USB and the letter, and stepped out onto the porch. The late afternoon sun had dipped low over the Blue Ridge peaks, casting long golden beams across the gravel path. In the community garden across the street, 2 kids drew houses in the dirt with sticks. One giggling, the other seriously adjusting a chimney made of rocks. The shapes were lopsided, the windows uneven. But the joy in their design, unmistakable. Riley smiled. She whispered into the breeze, "They don't have to say sorry. Just choose to start building something true." It had been a month since the engagement party, but Cedar Rise Collective was no longer a whispered name among rebuilding towns. It echoed louder, not through marketing, but through the mouths of families whose lives had quietly been reshaped. Local Montana papers called it a grassroots miracle. But it was a tiny weekly in Gallatin County that said it best: Cedar Rise, built by the failure of a family that once built everything except her. Riley Harmon didn't accept interviews. She turned down the glossy magazines and the primetime shows. But when a regional redevelopment summit invited her to speak beside engineers, city planners, and state officials, she said yes. Not because she wanted attention, but because someone out there might need her silence turned into something useful. Grant Holloway stood beside her that day, not as an accessory, not an apology, but as Cedar Rise's regional coordinator. No one asked why. His presence made sense now. Riley walked on stage in her usual faded denim and rolled-up sleeves. No slideshow, no speech, just a story. "A little girl once asked me," she began, "if I ever build houses with diamonds." A soft laugh rolled through the crowd. I told her no. I use reclaimed bricks, but they're strong enough to keep a family from falling apart. She paused. Let it land. "We don't build with what shines," she said. "We build with what survives, and we place it, brick by brick, where it truly belongs." No tagline, no fundraising ask, just truth. Then a woman stood in the back, voice shaking. "I'm a single mom. Cedar Rise rebuilt my house after the fire. But the real gift wasn't the roof. It was feeling like I deserved one." Silence. Then applause. Uncoached. Organic. Some stood. Some cried. Grant didn't speak. Didn't clap. He just stood a little taller. Like someone forgiven without being asked. As the session closed, Riley reached into her jacket and pulled out a weathered, chipped brick. She placed it gently on the podium. "If anyone's ever told you that you're not a strong enough foundation," she said, looking out, "remember, every home begins with one brick." Cedar Rise didn't rise from vengeance or vindication. It rose from endurance. Riley didn't need to destroy anyone's legacy. She simply built her own. And Grant? He didn't redeem himself by words, but by the foundations he now helped others stand on. Late afternoon sun hung low over the ridgelines of Bozeman, Montana. Riley stepped out of the Cedar Rise truck, sweat clinging to her back, toolbox in hand. In front of her stood a newly finished home. Nothing grand, nothing glossy, but solid, warm, real. Inside, volunteers checked fixtures and tightened corners. Grant walked the hall with a clipboard, calling out paint corrections and door adjustments. No one questioned leadership. The rhythm was earned. Riley crouched by a window to test the latch. A small hand tugged at her sleeve. "Did you build our house?" A boy, maybe 6, asked, eyes wide. Riley knelt down. "No," she smiled. "I just laid the first brick." He beamed, then darted off to show his sister their room. Outside, across the road, someone was watching. Riley's breath caught. Her mother. No jewelry, no designer coat. Just a soft cardigan and a brown paper bag pressed to her chest. They locked eyes. Stillness. Then her mother crossed slowly, placing the bag on the porch. "It's a photo," she said quietly. "You and your grandmother. She always said you had her stubbornness." Riley took it, but didn't open it. Her mother turned to leave, but Riley spoke first. "You once asked why I build with salvaged bricks," she said, voice steady. "Because they were cast aside, but when placed right, they're stronger than anything new." Her mother didn't turn back, but she paused and nodded. "I know," she said. "Now I know." Twilight set in. Purple stretched across the sky like brush strokes. Riley sat on the new front step as volunteers packed up. The porch light flicked on. Laughter echoed from inside. She pulled a small note from her pocket, creased, soft at the edges. Her grandmother's handwriting. "There will come a day when they call you by your work, not their expectations." Riley slipped it into the back of her field notebook, tucking it in like the final brick in a long wall. From inside, the boys' laughter rang again. Riley smiled. Not with pride, with peace. "I don't need a nameplate," she whispered. "I have a foundation, and I know I built it right." Sometimes, the strongest foundations are made from what others leave behind: quiet strength, unseen labor, and unshakable belief. Real success doesn't ask for applause. It stands, even when no one's watching. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, share your thoughts, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories that deserve to be heard.